Now let's graph the basic function y equals 2 to the x. Okay? Well, when x equals -2, then y equals 2 to the x would be 2 raised to the -2. Now before you watch me do it, figure out what 2 to the -2 ought to be using the rules I've got here. What is it? Well, here's how you do a negative exponent. If a is 2 and b is -2, then you have 2 to the -2, which is 1 over a to the b, which would be 1 over 2 to the second power. So that's 1 over 2 to the second power, which is 1/4. When x equals -1, you would get 2 to the -1, which is 1 over 2 to the 1, which is 1/2. When x is -1/2, you get 2 to the -1/2 equals 1 over 2 to the 1/2. But as we said here, 2 to the 1/2 is an irrational number. And one of the rules that we're going to use, we're not going to express a value. The value of this cannot be expressed as a fraction or a decimal. Okay? Not exactly. We cannot express it exactly. So we don't use (2 to the -x) for x equals 1/2 or -1/2. So we can kind of think, okay, that's forbidden from this process. It's not forbidden. I mean, it does have a value, but we don't know how to write it down, and we don't know how to find that value without using a calculator, and we're not going to do any calculators here. So we're not going to include that point. And we'll go ahead and cross out 1/2 also. We're not going to do that. Okay. Now what about x equals 0? Well, we would have 2 to the 0. What's 2 to the 0? Well, something I should have written down here but didn't think to is a to the 0 equals 1 for any a. A to the 0 is never 0, and I don't want to see anybody making that mistake, so try to get that out of your head by practicing. Okay? So 2 to the 0 equals 1. Then, of course, 2 to the 1 simply equals 2, and 2 to the second is 4. And now we've got a perfectly good table. We can easily sketch a good graph. That's not -2, that's 2. And here's -2. Here's -1, -1/2, 1, 1/2. Now actually the 1/2 is not going to give us a point, but we're going to use the 1/2 to do an estimate here. Let's see. Okay. Now I'm going to use a different colored chalk because the point -2 1/4. Well, first we've got to scale our y. Again, our biggest number is 4. Okay, so I can scale my y-axis. And now where is x equals -2 is here. 1/4 is subdivide, you get 1/2. Subdivide the interval from 0 to 1, you get 1/2. Subdivide that again, you've got 1/4. And now you can draw the 1/4 line and the y equals 1/4 line, the x equals 2 line. And you see that your point is down here. And then -1 1/2, well, here's 1/2. I didn't get this thing drawn real well, but hopefully you can do better. So there's 1/2. negative 1, 1/2. We don't have a point for negative 1/2 because we can't do it exactly. You don't know how to figure it out except to punch it into a calculator, so we're not going to use it. Later on, we'll punch things into calculators when necessary, but we won't do much of that. Okay, because we don't need to. Okay, when x is 0, y is 1, so here's 0, 1. And then 1, 2, well here's 1 and here's 2. And then 2, 4. Let's be careful to try to get this in the right place. Okay? And there is a set of 4 points that follow a pretty clear, smooth curve. And now if we want to know what y is when x equals, let's say, 1/2, we can do that on the graph. We can draw a vertical line here where x equals 1/2 and a horizontal line over here to the y-axis. Now if this is 1 and this is 2, that looks like it's around 1.5. If we do it accurately, we'll find it's a little less than 1.5, and it's actually pretty close to 1.4. We could also estimate the value of y when x equals 1/2, and we would find that it's here, and that's about 7. Now we'll do more of that, and we'll explain that, but hopefully you understand that when you see it. If not, we'll talk about it slowly and as clearly as possible. So there is your graph. Big thing to note, 2 to the 0 is 1 because any number raised to the 0 is 1. And we don't evaluate for x values where we don't know how to do the arithmetic. And we don't know how to do the arithmetic to find the 1/2 power of 2.